I had a conversation with an old friend, and it inspired me with thoughts that later resulted in this short text. I may disagree with him, in whole or in part, but he made some neurons move. Mongol, the structure of society in America has changed compared to the ideals. Don't pay attention to the patriotic rhetoric. We have an oligarchy now. We have political families consisting of several generations. We have megacorporations that transfer power internally or through family lines. This is the new royal power. I put down my glass and thought about his words. Could you expand on this topic? We have a sixth-generation politician from one of the most backward states in the country who, after becoming governor of his state, became a congressman. He is the second governor in his family, and the first is a senator. His grandfather was a politician and business magnate. His father was the same. Every firstborn in this family is being prepared for succession. If they cannot take the necessary steps to achieve their goals, they are created consistently. Unfortunately, the senator did not have a son. He has a daughter. She was a terrible student. Her true grades reflected that, but they were hushed up. She entered college with forged documents because her father is on the board of directors of this university, and she was awarded a diploma. Nobody knows that. Her grades were consistently failing, but somehow she got her degree. Since women politicians are not liked in this state, regardless of their merits, her father planned everything differently for her. Her father got her a job at one of the pharmaceutical companies in the state, one of the medium-sized ones, which at that time was a little lacking in leadership. She started making labels for folders there. A few years later, thanks to political influence, she became CEO, and she was a puppet for his father and some special interests. This company, which was the only industrial enterprise in the city and the basis of the economy, was gutted, sold, and exported to other countries under its leadership. Along the way, her father, the senator, received untold wealth. She herself earned at least $18 million on the golden parachute, and there were plenty of scandals. Because of the scandals, the daughter became the center of attention, and now her father doesn't really need her. She is in retirement, while her father announced that he was considering running for president. A lot of this was planned. This was not the original plan, which began with the birth of the firstborn, the inheritance of the sword from his father, and his transformation into the president. Nevertheless, backup plans worked, power was gathered, reputations were protected, secret contracts were used, and now some truly reprehensible people continue to move through the halls of power. Understand, if you deal with these people, they use the law to their advantage. They force people to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that ruin lives, they restrict people's actions, and they are liberal with punishments, especially long-term ones. They use the law to bend people to their will. Then he took a sip from his glass and considered his words thoughtfully. I know I'm talking like a conspiracy theorist, but this is already a constant thing. Even if you want to meet, or in some cases, just communicate with the heir, you have to go through certain procedures and be checked. Then you sign the contract. An accident is excluded. Everything is planned, with backup plans. Backup plans for backup plans. Randomness is allowed only in competition, and this is our last hope if nothing changes. We talk a little more about this and other topics, and our meeting ended positively. But she made me think. I was sitting and waiting for my bride. She was the best thing that ever happened to me, and 3 months later we had to stand in front of the altar and a huge audience to get married. I don't know how I managed to get her. She was just amazing. Rich, smart, and insanely beautiful. She had 2 higher educations, economics and business management. Her father owned the company she worked for, and they were very successful. She was the winner of a statewide beauty pageant. She was going to be my wife. I didn't care much about her money. She didn't have to work, let alone achieve all that she had achieved. She achieved this because she had a frantic drive. She was extremely single-minded. She had a life plan for the next 20 years. We met at a university reception. I had just been awarded the title of professor, and I became the second head of the department at the business school, and that was something because I was only 36. I was probably going to be the second head for another 15 years, but that was okay. I made my parents, who were teachers themselves, incredibly proud of themselves. Beverly just came up to me after it was over. They announced my promotion and position and introduced herself. It was strange. I consider myself mostly ordinary in appearance. unremarkable physically, but I must say that I am quite smart. I was one of the youngest in my field to receive a doctorate, and I started a side business early on in which I was available for consultations. I took a lot of money from those who could afford it, but mostly I gave free advice to promising people involved in startups. Beverly came over, held out her hand, holding a drink in the other, and just said, "I'm Beverly Madison. Nice to meet you." "Hello," I said as we shook hands. "Mark Hofer, glad to meet you. I take it you're the Miss Madison from Madison Tech." "Yes," she said, feeling some satisfaction at being recognized. "This is my personal assistant, Maddie Schwebel." She gestured to a smaller woman who was standing slightly behind her and to one side. The woman smiled at me and nodded slightly, waving her finger. This acquaintance and a short conversation led to the fact that I invited her to come to a consultation, which she pushed me to do. The first consultation took place a month later in a meeting room in one of the MadTech's offices, where 4 other people were staying. They were trying to make some predictions, and I was familiar with what they were looking for. This led to a second and then a third consultation. The third consultation led to Beverly and me having dinner at her expense. This dinner led to another dinner, but without consultation. Then I was invited to a 2-day tech show with her, where she was treated like royalty, and I happily followed her. In the evening, there was an early dinner, a visit to the museum, dancing, and a real affection for each other. The only obstacle was her entourage, which accompanies her everywhere. Then we started going to dinners and doing things without her entourage, and everything became more interesting. A year later, and after a lot of prodding on her part, I asked her to marry me, and incredibly, she agreed. She knew this was going to happen. It was clearly her idea. She just let me think it was mine. She's such a sweet, kind of mean CEO. And so I was sitting in the Michelin star restaurant, waiting for her security guard Jeff to appear, who was supposed to give the signal, and then my future bride was supposed to appear. 5 minutes before 8, I saw Jeff at the entrance. He nodded at me, and I smiled back at him. He looked around the room. I noticed his lips move slightly. Then he walked away and spoke to the manager. Beverly came in at 8 o'clock sharp. She was wearing a light brown pantsuit and a white silk blouse. Her hair was piled high. She wore minimal jewelry. Her makeup was done with taste, and she wore her preferred shoes with 2-inch stilettos. Her entourage followed, right behind her. Maddie smiled broadly and waved at me as she followed Beverly. A man and a woman from her guard separated halfway to our table and sat down at their own, at a respectful distance. I didn't know who the other gentleman following Beverly was. He must have been the new guard. As expected, Maddie sat down at the table next to us, an arm's length away from Beverly. What I didn't expect was that the new gentleman followed Beverly to our table. I got up to hold Beverly's chair, but noticed that the new guard also started reaching for her chair, presumably to do the same. I smiled at him, and he looked at me without the usual deadpan but polite expression that I was used to seeing. He looked slightly embarrassed. "Hi, honey," Beverly said, blowing me a kiss over her shoulder as I pulled a chair under her. "Hello, beautiful," I said in response, moving to my seat. At that moment, the manager put an extra chair at our table. It was strange because usually only Beverly and I were sitting at our table. The new guard came to the chair, nodded his thanks to the manager, and sat down next to us. "Hello," I said, extending my hand to a man who was taller and had at least 80 pounds, 36 kilograms, more muscle mass than me. "Hi," he said back, shaking my hand. "I'm Michael Johnson. Mark Hofer. Nice to meet you. Honey, Michael is joining us tonight. I want you to meet him. He's going to be involved in our future," Beverly explained to me. "Oh." I looked at Michael questioningly. Michael just smiled politely and looked embarrassed again. I also brought the first draft of our marriage contract. She held out her hand to Maddie, who obediently put almost a quarter of the stack of paper in it. I stared at the stack of paper she had placed on the edge of the table next to me. I knew that we would need a prenuptial agreement, but I have never seen such a voluminous legal document. It was the size of an old-style telephone directory. Basically, this is what we talked about: protecting the company and some of my assets, in particular shares. If we break up, you won't get any shares or anything that could put the company at risk, she explained, looking past me at the designated waiter to let him know that it was time to approach. "Good," I said, a little puzzled. "I'll ask my lawyers to take a look at it." "Of course." She smiled at me, then looked at the waiter, who came to our table first. But I have something there that we haven't discussed. A few things. Beverly held out her hand to the waiter, stopping him from listing the dishes. This is partly about Michael. I looked at Michael, who looked a little awkward. Beverly made a come-on gesture to the waiter, and he told us what the chef would cook for us. As a result, Beverly ordered for herself, then for me, after which Michael pronounced his order in a deep bass voice. In general, it concerns, Beverly continued as the waiter left us, the baby we're going to have, the care we're going to give him, and what you're going to get when he turns 18. Wait, what? I asked. Be careful. I'm telling you. Beverly gave me a condescending smile. The patient and generally joyful expression disappeared from my face, turning into a worried one. What I felt inside, why did I just hear about this now? Shouldn't I have found out about this earlier? I mean, before I proposed, shouldn't I have known about it? You will raise the child, take care of him, and meet all his needs until adulthood. Then I'll take it upon myself, and then we will draw up a new contract. I'm sure I'm frowning now. It was so far from what I had imagined. It was so cold. The contract contains requirements for nutrition, education, and physical activity of the child at every stage of his life. I'm afraid it's out of the question, Beverly told me, looking a little apologetic. You'll have to move when he goes to the appropriate schools, but I'll take care of all the expenses, and it won't affect your financial situation in any way. Wait, I said, holding up my palm to signal her to stop. It wasn't the Beverly I thought I knew. What? The only problem may be your access to the child when he is on certain campuses, Beverly said, ignoring my gesture to wait. We will resolve this issue as best we can, but in some situation you may have to live off campus. Wait, I said, gathering more strength in my voice. I caught what was being said to me and felt disgusted. So many ideas and hopes were destroyed while I listened to this woman go on and on without emotion. People don't behave like that. We expect that the child will start studying at Harvard in his 17th year of life, and we will arrange housing for you, the child and the staff near the campus. Beverly continued to ignore my pleas. Stop, I said, leaning toward her. I rarely raise my voice, but in this case it was necessary. No more pressure, no more concessions to her. It was over. Beverly gets her way too often, and she can expect it, but it's over with me, now. Beverly closed her mouth and looked at me in mild surprise. She was not used to hearing such a word. What are you talking about? I said, more like I asked. I was sure I had an idea of what I was hearing, but I wanted this woman to confirm it, just to make it clear to me. The baby, Beverly said. The child that we will have next year, in May. I knew that Beverly was planning everything, but it was just ridiculous. Stop being the CEO and talk to me like a fiancé, I said. It's in the contract, Beverly said, looking at the waiter approaching with the wine. Obviously, she wanted me to hear the truth, which she wanted me to subscribe to, from someone else. No, this is unacceptable. I had to hear it from her. I held out my hand to stop the waiter, who stopped a few feet away from me with a confused look. No, I said to Beverly. Explain it. Beverly, who was not used to this tone from anyone, and certainly not from me, looked slightly puzzled. Michael looked clearly uncomfortable. This is a plan for the baby. Beverly spoke a little more slowly and gestured at the contract. Your duties are explained here. Wait a minute. Stop there, I said, not wanting to go on this railroad. Child is an incredibly cold way to describe what was once supposed to be our children. A look of mild confusion appeared on Bev's face. You already have a plan for our child, I stated. For the child you're going to raise, Beverly clarified. A child, I repeated. Explain it first. Beverly looked more than calm now, which was a rarity. I'm having a baby and a child, I repeated, interrupting her. A child, meaning not our child. Not my child. I narrowed my eyes at her. Well, I admit, I'm embarrassed to explain this part to you, Mark. Beverly went into executive mode. Her posture changed from relaxed to more formal. I knew from past experience that this is where she hides when she gets uncomfortable. But in fact, yes, the baby won't be from your genes. I leaned back in my chair and looked at the woman. She looked at me steadily. Cold, unbiased. It was decided that although you have the high level of intelligence that we want for a child, this intelligence also depends heavily on the environment, and your line does not have the physical data that we want to get. Who is we? I asked. I already knew, but like I said, I needed to hear it. My father and I, Beverly said. So, I have to raise a child to whom I would not be a father? I said with contempt in my voice. Beverly just stared at me, some subtle play of emotion momentarily gripping her features. Mark, she softened her tone a little, trying to get my attention. I've seen her do it before. It was a tactic. I have a plan. I love you very much, but I want the child to have certain things that neither you nor your parents physically have. I asked, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. I want the child to be gifted academically and athletically. Eugenics, I stated. That's right, Beverly confirmed. With a little scientific help. In your opinion, I don't have very good genes for this? I said half interrogatively. That's not an opinion, Beverly said. Although everyone in your family has shown outstanding intelligence for 4 generations, none of you have the size or athletic abilities that we would like to see in a child. Have you explored us so far into the past? I asked. Actually, even further away, but the records have become increasingly incomplete since the 1800s. Beverly then motioned for the waiter to pour the wine. So you want me to raise a child whose father won't be me? I concluded. Will I be responsible for his upbringing, education, health, and generally for everything after you write down what you want to do? In fact, yes, Beverly confirmed. No. Beverly looked at me with mild surprise. I used another word that she wasn't used to hearing. We stared at each other for a few seconds. Michael's eyes darted from Beverly to me and back again. Mark, let me explain. Oh, that's not all. Fine, I said. The sarcasm went past Beverly's ears. She doesn't come across it often. My gaze shifted to Michael. I foresaw where this would lead. He kept his eyes on Beverly. He looked like he was studying. I'm going to get pregnant. It's important for my family to continue, Beverly explained. We think we can guarantee a male, which is what we hope for. This is a simple intervention that we can do after fertilization. Fertilization, I repeated. Beverly just nodded. After I carry the baby, you and your staff will take responsibility for him. Don't worry, I'll still be around, but to be honest, I don't care too much about the kids. I just sat with my arms crossed. Michael was looking at Beverly, concern on his face. We have a map of indicators that the child should achieve as he grows up. You will be responsible for them. You will have all the help you need. Don't worry, there won't be any costs, Beverly assured me. I made a motion with my hand, encouraging her to continue. I wanted everything, the whole story. Right now, I wanted to hear everything, at least once, to burn all the love I had for Beverly. Everything that was left in the corners of my soul should have burned in the rage that I felt for her now. At the age of 18, I will take over the management, along with my father, if he is still around. We're going to prepare him to take over the business, Beverly said, reaching for the wine. Seeing that I didn't react in any way, Beverly continued. At this stage, if you and I still want to be married, we will draw up a new contract. If not, then your benefits and severance pay are written into this contract. I admit, it's a bit generous. Beverly gave me a loving smile at that. You will receive a bonus of $18 million, $1 million for each year of the child's life, in addition to your annual remuneration. I raised an eyebrow. How fatalistic. She didn't even believe in being together forever and hadn't planned on it. I wasn't looking for a temporary job. I imagined how I would grow old with it. Not anymore. Of course, there are penalties for not following the schedule, but I admit the possibility of changing it, Beverly said. You have the right to vote. Really, right? Well, yes. Sure. Beverly looked generous now. Your family are all careful planners, smart, and most importantly, you are all teachers with a history. You all know how to transmit information. This is a valuable skill that is often underestimated. I would really like the child to learn this. I thought about it irritably for 2 seconds. And who will be the father? I asked a little grumpily. I had an unpleasant suspicion. Michael will be the father, Beverly informed me, not looking at the aforementioned man sitting with us. Michael sat with his fingertips touching, and his elbows rested on the edge of the table. He looked both thoughtful and preoccupied. His eyes stared blankly at the middle of the table. His height, according to my estimates, exceeded 6 feet 5 inches, 196 centimeters. He had the mass of a football player, but at the same time looked athletically slender. His neck was wiry and thick. The sleeves of his jacket were very full. He was a man who trained a lot. "Why am?" I asked, gesturing at Michael, who was now looking at me only with his eyes. "Michael and I have known each other for several years," Beverly explained. "He has a pleasant physical appearance for me. His family is historically athletic and also quite smart." I lowered my raised eyebrow. Michael received a master's degree in civil engineering. His mother is a doctor of medicine, and his father is an electrical engineer. His pedigree is also impressive. Michael glanced briefly at Beverly, then back at me, as if he was interested in my opinion. I didn't show it. "Do you love me?" I asked, my voice harsh. I wanted to hear that lie. "Of course I do." Beverly looked shocked and a little offended by my question. "Then why all this?" I said, gesturing at the contract. "It's just an obvious fact that marriages don't work out," Beverly said defensively. "There are many factors. I'm sure you're familiar with them. I have to protect myself, the company, and the child. And if I refuse to sign the contract?" "What?" Beverly asked, confused by the question. "I don't care about anything in this contract that concerns protecting your money or the company." I almost growled. "But what about the child? My role in this? Forget about it." "I'm afraid that's out of the question, Mark," Beverly said, switching into CEO mode. "I'm not your employee, Beverly. No, you are my fiancé. But although there is room for negotiation in this contract, the basic terms regarding the child are inflexible." Beverly lectured me. "I refuse," I told her. A slight play of emotions appeared on her face again, but then she returned to CEO mode. "I'm sorry to hear that," she said. "I was sorry to hear everything you told me today," I said in response. She sat down and thought for a moment, buying time by drinking some wine. After she put the glass back on the table, the waiter filled it to the required level. "Why?" she asked me. "Because I wanted a child or two from you. My own child. I refuse to raise another man's child, especially the one I now suspect you slept with during our courtship. I want to have a say in these kids' lives, not be some kind of babysitter you pay. I'm supposed to be your husband, not your employee," I explained harshly. "We believe that a child is an important aspect of our lives and our future. We will plan everything carefully and allocate a lot of funds for it," she told me. "And none of this will depend on me," I finished for her. "No, you're going to participate," Beverly said. "But it will need to be approved." I leaned back in my chair again, not believing what I was hearing. "No, Mark, the contract is generous," Beverly said, looking a little upset. "I insisted on it, and they gave it to me because I'm also a little disappointed with the situation. I think we have reached a good compromise, and after you consult with your lawyers, I believe you will find it not only fair but also extremely profitable." "Cool shit," I told her. "What? I'm sorry. Is that a ring?" I pointed to the wedding ring on her finger, which had belonged to my family for 3 generations. "Take it off. It's mine." "Mark, marriage is a contract, just like any other," Beverly said, her face mask slightly cracked again, and concern appeared in her. "It makes sense to outline and define everything in advance. You know that." "I'd like my ring back, if I may," I said, getting up and buttoning my jacket. "Mark, please." Beverly was definitely unhappy. "I love you." I held out my hand, palm up. I kept holding her. Beverly's mask, hard as iron, slowly lowered back down, and making more and more confident movements, she took off the ring and gently placed it in my hand. I closed my fingers around the ring with which my great-grandfather got engaged to my great-grandmother and felt its strength. It was a simple gold ring with a tiny diamond in the setting. It wasn't worth much, but its value to me was much, much more than any jeweler could have assigned. There's no way this corporate ice princess is going to get it. She was unworthy. "I'm sorry we couldn't come to an agreement, Mark," Beverly said, looking into my eyes. "I wish you all the best." I thought about her parting statement. "I'm sorry for who you're going to end up with." I told her there was no venom in my voice that I wanted to put into it. "I love you, Beverly, but this." I shook my head sadly. I gave Michael a look full of contempt. He gracefully assumed a shamefaced look. "Call me if you ever decide to become human." I told Beverly, "Turn around," and left this life behind. "It was unpleasant," Beverly said, watching Mark leave the restaurant. Michael's gaze was fixed on the table in front of him, between his hands. Maddie was sitting next to her, her face expressionless, as her job required. But secretly she was glad that everything happened exactly as it happened. She had a good opinion of Mr. Hofer, and from today on, she began to think even better of him. However, pregnancy is still on the schedule, Beverly mused aloud. Perhaps even to Michael. After the European conference and receiving help from the progenetics team, we will be able to replace Mark as the child's guardian. She paused, thinking. I really love him, she said softly. The second child would be his. She paused again. If my father would let me, she finished. Michael stood up and looked around the tables and the people around, as if seeking their opinions on what had happened and the future. He didn't notice anything on Maddie's face, but the waiter looked clearly uncomfortable. Beverly, he said, reaching over to the table and raising his glass of wine. For the first time that evening, Beverly turned and looked at him directly. Michael drained his glass and put it back in its place. He waved at the waiter, who came over to fill a glass. I'm afraid you've lost my help, Michael told her. I don't really want to deal with you anymore. You can't, Beverly said, her disappointment obvious. You signed it. Let the lawyers figure it out. Michael walked around the table and away from her. But we're done. I hated that you got involved with Hofer, but I did it because I loved you. He stopped and looked at her across the table. I even accepted the role of a donor because I had hoped that one day I would be able to win you over. I've been feeling kind of high for a while, knowing that you're going to have my baby and you're going to force Hofer to raise him. Michael, but Beverly, Michael told her, you're a complete fool. My mom would disown me if I contacted you. And you too, sighed Beverly. Fuck off, you brainless witch, Michael said, following Mark Hofer's path out of this life.